If my car doors had it locked automatically when I shifted into drive, I probably wouldn't be telling you this. That's the thing that stays with me. Not the blown tire, not the darkness, not even the two strangers who appeared out of nowhere on a dead stretch of highway. It's the fact that my survival came down to a factory-installed feature that I'd never once thought about before that night. One mechanical click between me and whatever those men had planned. I work in heating and cooling repair. Commercial and residential, mostly service calls. It's the kind of job where you spend half your day driving and the other half crouched in someone's crawl space or standing on a roof in weather that makes you question your life choices. By the time the last call is done, your hands smell like refrigerant and your back feels like it belongs to someone 20 years older. You don't think about much on the drive home. You think about a shower, clean clothes, and your alarm clock. That's the whole list. In January of 2020, I was finishing up a late service call south of the city. It was one of those rush jobs where the customer's furnace had died and they had kids in the house, so I drove out in my personal car instead of waiting for the company van. My tool bag was in the trunk. My work boots were on the passenger floorboard, and I was heading north on a two-lane state highway that cut through flat, empty farmland. No streetlights, no buildings. Just the occasional pair of headlights coming the other direction and a whole lot of nothing. It wasn't raining, but the January air had that heavy dampness that fogs your windshield from the inside. I had the defroster on low, just enough to keep the glass clear. The road was quiet. My mind was already home. I was mentally walking through my front door, dropping my keys on the counter, peeling off my jacket. Then my front driver's side tire hit something. It wasn't a gradual thing. There was no slow wobble or gentle pull to one side. It was a hard, violent impact, like driving over a railroad spike at 50 miles an hour. The steering wheel wrenched to the left, and a rapid slapping sound filled the car as the tire came apart. The whole vehicle shuddered, and I could feel the vibration in my jaw, in my fillings, in the bones of my hands gripping the wheel. I eased off the accelerator and guided the car onto the shoulder, fighting the pull the entire way. The shoulder on that stretch was barely wide enough for a compact car. Beyond it was a shallow drainage ditch, and then open field. I stopped at an angle because there wasn't room to straighten out, killed my speed, and sat there with my hazards ticking. First thing I did was check my mirrors for oncoming traffic. Nothing behind me, nothing approaching. The highway was empty in both directions. I picked up my phone and glanced at the signal. 1 bar. It flickered to 0, came back, flickered again. Useless. I sat there for a moment with both hands still on the wheel, listening. The engine idled. The hazards clicked. Beyond that, silence. The kind of silence that only exists on rural roads after dark, where the nearest human being might be 5 miles away or 5 feet away and you'd never know the difference. I'm not the kind of person who panics over a flat tire. I've changed dozens of them. You jack the car, pull the lugs, swap the wheel, and you're back on the road in 20 minutes. But doing it on the shoulder of a dark highway is a different experience. You're exposed. You're focused on a task that puts your back to traffic. Your hands are occupied. Your attention is split between the lug wrench and the sound of anything approaching behind you. I got out, walked to the trunk, and pulled back the spare tire cover. Everything was where it should be. Spare, jack, wrench, the whole kit. I grabbed the flashlight from my tool bag and crouched near the blown tire. The sidewall had separated completely, peeled back in ragged strips. Under the beam of the flashlight, the edge of the tear looked almost too clean, like something had scored the rubber before the blowout finished the job. But the tire was so shredded and filthy that I couldn't be certain. I swept the flashlight behind the car, looking for whatever had hit. The lane was clear. Nothing on the pavement, nothing on the shoulder. Whatever it was had either bounced into the ditch or been kicked away by the impact. I didn't spend long looking. I wanted to get the spare on and get moving. I set the flashlight on the ground, angled it toward the travel lane so approaching cars might see the reflection, and positioned the jack under the frame. The gravel was loose and damp, and the jack base shifted when I started cranking. I had to reset it, find a firmer spot, and start over. The whole process was slower than I wanted. That's when headlights appeared behind me. They came from the south, growing steadily brighter. At first, I assumed it was a truck that would drift into the left lane and pass. Instead, the vehicle slowed, pulled onto the shoulder, and stopped directly behind my car. Close. Uncomfortably close. Close enough that the headlights flooded my rear window and turned both side mirrors into blinding white rectangles. I couldn't see the vehicle clearly, just the shape of it through the glare. A pickup truck, older model, sitting high on its suspension. Two doors opened almost simultaneously. Two men stepped out and started walking toward me without hesitation. No pause to assess the situation, no casual glance at the tire or the jack. They moved with a kind of coordination that suggested they'd done this before. One came up the driver's side. The other circled around the passenger side of my car, staying close to the body panels, almost brushing against the metal. I stood up from my crouch and watched them approach. I waited for the standard interaction, the "you all right?" or "need some help?" that you'd expect from someone pulling over for a stranger, but neither of them spoke. They just kept walking, closing the distance in steady, deliberate steps. The one on the driver's side reached me first. He was average height, stocky build, wearing a dark canvas jacket with the collar turned up. His face was partially lit by the glow of my hazard lights, enough to see his expression. It was flat, focused, not concerned, not curious. Just attentive, the way someone looks when they're sizing up a situation they've already made decisions about. "Car trouble?" he said. His voice was calm, but there was no warmth in it. The question sounded rehearsed, like the first line of a script he'd memorized. "Blew a tire," I said. "I've got it handled." He nodded slowly, but he didn't stop moving. He took another step closer, too close. Close enough that I could have reached out and touched his chest. Nobody stands that close to a stranger on the side of a highway unless they want something. The second man had reached the passenger side of my car. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking through the windows, his head tilting slightly as he scanned the interior, not the way a passerby glances into a car out of idle curiosity. Methodically, checking the seats, the console, the floorboard, cataloging what was inside. "We can help you with that," the first man said, gesturing vaguely toward the flat tire without looking at it. "I'm good," I said again, appreciated though. He didn't acknowledge the refusal. His eyes moved from my face to my hands, then to the open trunk behind me, then back to my face. He was calculating something. I could feel it the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. I took a step backward toward my open driver's door. The keys were in the ignition. The engine was still running. I hadn't planned that. It was just laziness, leaving the car idling while I worked. But in that moment, it became the most critical decision I'd made all night. The second man moved toward the rear passenger door. He didn't announce himself. He didn't look at me for permission. He simply reached down and pulled the handle. Hard. Not a test pull. A committed yank. The kind meant to open a door, not check if it's locked. The handle snapped back against the frame, and the door rattled, but held. He pulled again, harder, and the sound traveled through the entire car, a metallic jolt that I felt in the soles of my feet. The first man took another step forward. "Open the door," he said. Not a request, a command. His voice had dropped the pretense of helpfulness entirely. It was flat and direct, like he was giving instructions to someone who had no choice but to comply. I didn't respond. I was already moving. I dropped into the driver's seat, pulled the door shut, and heard the locks engage automatically. The central locking system activated the moment the door closed, a soft mechanical click that sealed all four doors simultaneously. It was the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. The first man was at my window instantly. He leaned down, his face inches from the glass, and said something I couldn't fully hear through the sealed cabin. His mouth moved, his jaw tight, and he rapped on the window with his knuckles. Two sharp knocks, impatient and aggressive. Behind me, the second man had moved from the passenger side to the rear driver's side door. I heard another handle pull, then footsteps circling toward the trunk. I glanced at the rearview mirror, but the pickup's headlights were so bright that everything behind me was just white glare and shifting shadows. I reached for my phone with my right hand and tried to dial 911 with my thumb. The screen showed no signal. Dead air. I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat and put both hands on the wheel. The first man knocked on the glass again, louder this time. He pointed down the road ahead of my car and made a sweeping gesture, like he wanted me to step out and walk with him somewhere. His expression hadn't changed. Still flat. Still focused. Still calculating. I looked at the side mirror. The pickup was parked at an angle that blocked most of the shoulder behind me. If another car wanted to pull over, they'd have to stop in the travel lane or park so far back they might not even see me. The positioning wasn't accidental, it was strategic. These men had done this before. I made my decision. I put the car in drive and pressed the accelerator. The sound was immediate and horrific. The bare rim hit the pavement with a grinding metallic shriek that vibrated through the entire chassis. Sparks erupted from beneath the front end, visible in the side mirror like tiny orange fireworks. The steering wheel fought me, pulling hard to the left, trying to drag the car off the shoulder and into the ditch. I gripped it with both hands and held the line, forcing the car forward along the narrow strip of asphalt. The first man jumped back. As I passed him, he swung his open palm against the side panel of my car. The impact was loud, a flat crack of skin against metal that sounded like anger given a voice. In the mirror, I saw the second man stepping quickly away from the rear of the car, moving with the practiced urgency of someone who'd anticipated this possibility. I didn't look back again. I kept my eyes on the white line at the edge of the lane and the dark stretch of highway ahead. The rim chewed into the pavement with every rotation, sending tremors through the seat and up my spine. My hands ached from gripping the wheel. The car wanted to veer, wanted to spin, wanted to stop. I wouldn't let it. Behind me, the pickup's headlights stayed stationary for a few seconds. Then they moved. I couldn't tell if the truck was pulling onto the road or repositioning on the shoulder. I didn't slow down to find out. The next half mile was the longest distance I've ever driven. Every second, I expected headlights to fill my mirror. Expected the truck to roll up behind me. Expected something worse. The rims sparked and screamed beneath me. The car shuddered like it was falling apart. But it moved forward, and that was all that mattered. When I saw the gas station lights ahead, pale white fluorescence glowing above 2 fuel pumps in a small convenience store, my vision blurred for a moment. Not from tears. From the sudden release of tension I'd been holding in every muscle of my body. I pulled into the lot, stopped the car near the store entrance under the brightest light I could find, and sat there with my hands still on the wheel, breathing. The deputy who responded was professional and brief. I gave him the description: dark pickup, older model, 2 men in dark jackets, no plate number. I explained that their headlights had been positioned to blind my mirrors, that I never had a clear look at the truck's rear end. He drove south on the highway for several miles and came back with nothing. No vehicle matching the description. No one parked on the shoulder. No evidence that anyone had been there at all. The next morning, I had the car towed to a shop. The rim was destroyed. The fender liner was shredded from the vibration. The tire itself was so mangled that the technician couldn't definitively say what caused the blowout. He asked if I'd hit road debris. I said, probably. I didn't mention the rest. I think about that night more than I'd like to admit. Not the tire, not the damage, not even the drive on the rim. I think about how quickly those 2 men moved. How neither of them looked at the flat tire or the jack or the spare. How they went straight for the door handles. How the pickup was positioned to isolate me from passing traffic. And I think about something else. Something I noticed only afterward, when I was sitting in that gas station lot waiting for the deputy. My jack was still set up on the shoulder where I'd left it. My flashlight was still on the ground. My trunk was still open. Everything was exactly where it had been when I drove away, except the lug wrench. I'd set it beside the jack when I started working. When the car was towed the next day and I collected my things from the shoulder, the wrench was gone. The jack was there, the flashlight was there. But the wrench, a solid steel bar with a socket on one end, was nowhere to be found. One of them took it, which means at least one of them went back to that shoulder after I drove away. Stood in the dark where my car had been, picked up the only thing worth taking, and waited for the next set of headlights to slow down. I don't drive that stretch of highway anymore. I take the long way home now, even when it adds 40 minutes. And I never pull onto a shoulder. If the car can roll, I roll it to an exit, to a gas station, to anywhere with lights and cameras and other human beings. I'll destroy the rim. I'll ruin the axle. I'll drive on sparks until the wheel falls off entirely. Because a rim can be replaced. A fender can be repaired. But I keep thinking about that lug wrench, out there somewhere in the dark, in the hands of a man who never once looked at my tire. And I wonder how many other people have pulled onto that shoulder since then, and whether any of them made it to the gas station. The next morning, when I walked around my truck in the daylight, I found a smudge on the rear window. It looked like fingers, not a full handprint. just a wide, dragging impression of someone's palm pressed against the glass and pulled away. I don't touch the rear window. I never have a reason to, which means someone else did. And the only time my truck was parked somewhere unfamiliar, somewhere dark, somewhere I wasn't watching every angle, was that rest area at 11 o'clock at night with a white van idling 30 feet away. I wiped the smudge off with a shop rag and tried to forget about it. I haven't been able to. My work takes me across state lines regularly. I handle commercial renovation projects. The kind of jobs that involve gutting old retail spaces or converting warehouses, and the contracts are spread across the western half of the country. That means long drives, 12 hours in a day sometimes, crossing landscapes that change from mountains to plains to desert and back again, without much in between. I've made peace with it. The driving is part of the job the way early mornings and sore knees are part of the job. You learn to settle into the rhythm of it. Cruise control walked in, hands relaxed on the wheel, eyes scanning the road in that automatic way that comes from doing something thousands of times. You stop noticing the distance after a while. It just becomes time measured in podcasts and fuel stops and the slow rotation of highway signs. Interstate 80 through Wyoming is one of my regular corridors. I know it well enough that I can almost feel the exits coming before I see the signs. During the day, it's one of the most open stretches of highway in the country. Flat rangeland extending to the horizon in every direction. The sky so wide it feels like you're driving across the bottom of a bowl. At night, it's different. At night, it's just your headlights and the road and the wind. Always the wind. Wyoming wind doesn't gust, it pushes. A constant lateral pressure that you feel in the steering wheel that nudges the truck sideways if you're not correcting for it. In April of 2019, I was heading east toward Cheyenne after finishing a job that had run several hours past schedule. It was fully dark by the time I got on the highway. Clear sky, no precipitation, temperatures dropping into the low 30s. Traffic was sparse the way it usually is on that stretch after 9 or 10 at night. A few semis spaced far apart, the occasional passenger car, long gaps of empty road between them. I was doing a few miles under the speed limit because the crosswind was strong enough to require constant attention. My truck handles it fine, but you learn not to get complacent. One unexpected gust at 75 and you're suddenly occupying someone else's lane. I first noticed the vehicle from maybe a quarter mile out. Hazard lights blinking on the right shoulder. Orange pulses reflecting off the pavement. It's a common enough sight on any highway. Someone pulled over for mechanical trouble, a bathroom emergency, a phone call they didn't want to take at speed. You see it, you move left to give space, and you keep going. As I closed the distance, something about the positioning caught my attention. The vehicle wasn't parked parallel to the road the way most stopped cars are. It was angled. The front end pointed slightly toward the travel lane, like whoever had pulled over hadn't quite committed to stopping. Not perpendicular, not blocking anything, just off enough that it looked deliberate, like the vehicle was ready to move at a moment's notice. It was a white cargo van, no markings, no company logo on the side panel, no phone number stenciled on the rear doors, just flat white paint under the amber pulse of the hazard lights, the kind of van that could belong to anyone or no one. I checked my mirrors, eased left in my lane, and passed it at speed. As my headlights swept across the van's windshield, I caught a brief impression of the driver's seat. Someone was sitting in it. I couldn't see features. The glass reflected my headlights back at me, but there was a shape behind the wheel. Present, waiting. I passed without slowing and watched the van shrink in my rearview mirror. The hazards blinked orange against the dark shoulder. I looked ahead. I looked back again. The hazards had stopped. The van's headlights came on. Two white beams cutting forward as the vehicle rolled off the shoulder and merged onto the highway behind me. No turn signal. No hesitation. Just a smooth, immediate transition from stationary to moving, timed precisely to my passing. I told myself it was coincidence. Someone had been resting, saw traffic, decided to get back on the road. It happens constantly. There was nothing inherently sinister about a van resuming travel on a public highway, but I kept watching. The van settled into the right lane behind me at a distance of maybe 200 feet. Not aggressive, not tailgating, just present, holding a fixed position like a car on a tow bar. I maintained my speed. A minute passed. 2 minutes. The gap didn't change. Drivers pace each other on highways all the time, often without realizing it. You match someone's speed because it's comfortable, because their taillights give your eyes something to focus on, because your brain is on autopilot and the easiest thing to do is follow. It's normal. What's less normal is when the pacing is perfect. I nudged my cruise control up by 3 miles per hour, a subtle change, barely noticeable on the speedometer. In the mirror, the van maintained the exact same distance. I tapped the brakes lightly, disengaging cruise, and let my speed drift down by 4 or 5 miles per hour. The van slowed at the same rate, same gap, same position, like it was tethered to me by an invisible cable. I brought my speed back up. The van followed. I let it drop again. The van matched. Every adjustment I made, no matter how small, was mirrored precisely, not approximately. Precisely. I changed lanes. There was nobody in the left lane. I signaled, moved over, and held the lane. In the mirror, the van signaled left and followed me over. Same distance, same speed, same deliberate, mechanical precision. My hands tightened on the wheel. The rational part of my brain was still offering explanations. Tired driver following your taillights. Coincidental speed matching. Nothing to worry about. But the animal part, the part that doesn't bother with explanations, had already made its assessment. I was being followed. The next exit was still several miles ahead. I considered taking it, but I knew that stretch. The exits between towns in Wyoming don't lead to gas stations and fast food. They lead to 2-lane county roads that disappear into rangeland. No lights, no buildings, no witnesses. Taking an isolated exit with an unknown vehicle behind you is trading one vulnerability for a worse one. I kept driving and watched for options. A sign appeared for a rest area, 2 miles ahead. That felt different. Rest areas have overhead lighting, security cameras, bathroom buildings with cinder block walls and heavy doors. They have parking lots designed for multiple vehicles. And at this hour, there would likely be at least 1 or 2 semi-trucks parked for the night, drivers sleeping in their cabs, other human beings within shouting distance. I put on my signal early, giving the van plenty of warning. I slowed gradually as the rest area entrance approached. In the mirror, the van slowed with me, maintaining that same unbroken distance. I turned off the highway and into the rest area. The lot was partially lit by tall sodium lamps that cast wide pools of yellowish light across the concrete. I drove straight to the main building and parked in a space directly beneath one of the brightest fixtures, close to the entrance, close to the cameras mounted above the doors. I left my engine running. I watched the entrance in my side mirror. The van turned in. It followed the same driveway I'd taken, past the fork where trucks split off toward the larger lot, and came directly toward the passenger vehicle parking area. It didn't circle. It didn't hesitate. It didn't scan for an open space. It pulled across 2 parking spots, angled slightly, and stopped with its front end oriented toward my truck. The engine stayed running. The headlights stayed on. No door opened. No dome light appeared. No silhouette moved behind the windshield. It just sat there, watching. I sat in my truck for what felt like several minutes, but was probably less than 2. The van didn't move. My chest felt tight, not from panic, but from that particular tension of forced stillness, of wanting to act but not knowing what the right action is. A semi pulled into the far end of the lot and parked with its engine running. The deep rumble of its diesel carried across the pavement, and something about that sound loosened the knot in my chest slightly. I wasn't alone in this lot anymore. I decided to go inside the building. If the van's driver was going to do something, making them do it in a lit, semi-public space was better than sitting in my truck waiting. I stepped out, closed the door, and walked toward the building entrance at a normal pace. Not fast, not slow. I didn't want to project fear. I wanted to project awareness. As I walked, I glanced toward the van without turning my head. Still running. Still dark inside. Still motionless. The windshield was tinted or dirty enough that I couldn't make out anything behind it from this angle. I couldn't tell if 1 person was inside or 3. The rest area building was the standard layout. Fluorescent lighting that made everything look slightly green. Tile floors. A row of vending machines humming against one wall. 2 restroom entrances. A large window facing the parking lot. There were 2 other people inside. A heavy-set truck driver drying his hands near the bathroom exit, and a middle-aged woman filling a water bottle at the fountain. Neither of them looked alarmed. Neither of them seemed to have noticed anything unusual about the van in the lot. I positioned myself near the front windows where I could watch the parking area while appearing to check my phone. The van sat in its two spaces, engine running, headlights on, completely still. 5 minutes passed. The truck driver walked out and crossed the lot to his rig without looking toward the van. The woman left through a side exit and walked to a sedan parked near the building. After 7 or 8 minutes, the van's brake lights flared red. It reversed out of the double space, turned slowly, and drove toward the exit. No sudden acceleration. No dramatic departure. Just a calm, deliberate exit, like someone who had seen what they needed to see and decided to move on. I watched it merge back onto the interstate heading east, its taillights shrinking into the darkness until they were indistinguishable from any other vehicle on the road. I stayed inside the building for another 10 minutes. I used the bathroom. I bought a coffee from the vending machine that tasted like hot water and regret. I watched the entrance ramp for any sign of the van returning. Nothing came. When I finally walked back to my truck, I scanned the lot methodically. The semi was still idling in its spot. The wind had picked up, carrying grit across the concrete in thin sheets. My truck sat under the lamp where I'd left it, looking exactly the same. I got in, locked the doors, and made a decision. Instead of taking the rest area's direct ramp back onto the interstate, I followed a frontage road that ran parallel to the highway for about a mile before reconnecting at a different merge point. It added a few minutes, but it meant I wouldn't be entering traffic at the exact spot someone might be waiting for me. When I merged back onto Interstate 80, I watched my mirrors with a focus that bordered on obsessive. Every set of headlights that appeared behind me was suspect. Every white vehicle was a threat until proven otherwise. I drove another 30 miles before stopping again, this time at a full-scale truck stop with a restaurant, a fueling island, and enough overhead lighting to perform surgery under. The rest of the drive was quiet, no van, no matching speeds, no unexplained stops on the shoulder, just wind and darkness and the hum of tires on pavement. I made it to my destination without further incident. Checked into a motel, slept poorly, and woke up early for the next job site. Before I left, out of habit, I wafted around the truck the way I always do, checking tires, looking for fluid leaks, scanning for anything unusual. That's when I noticed the mark on the rear window. It was a wide smudge near the center of the glass. Not a full handprint, but the unmistakable impression of fingers and the heel of a palm, dragged slightly to one side as if the hand had been pressed flat and then pulled away. The kind of mark that comes from someone touching glass deliberately, not from accidentally brushing against it. I stood there looking at it for a long time. I tried to remember the last time I touched that window myself. I couldn't, because I don't. There's no reason to. I load and unload from the tailgate, not the window. Tools go in from the sides. Nothing about my routine involves pressing my hand against the rear glass, which left a narrow and deeply uncomfortable list of possibilities. The mark could have been left at any point during the previous day. At the job site, at a gas station, at the rest area, while I was inside the building, watching the front of the van and not the back of my truck. I wiped it off with a rag and spent the rest of the morning trying not to think about how close someone had been to my vehicle without me knowing. That was 5 years ago. I still drive Interstate 80 regularly. I still pass vehicles parked on the shoulder with their hazards on. I still see white cargo vans on the highway. Dozens of them every week. Most of them have logos, phone numbers, company names. Some of them don't. And when one of those unmarked vans appears in my rearview mirror and holds the same distance for a little too long, I don't wait to see what it does. I take the next exit that has lights. I pull into the busiest lot I can find, and I don't get out until I'm certain that whatever was behind me has moved on to someone else. Because here's what I keep coming back to. The thing that won't let me file this away as a strange coincidence and move on. That van was parked on the shoulder with its hazards on, angled toward the road, engine apparently off, waiting, and the moment I passed, it came alive, which means it wasn't broken down. It wasn't resting. It was sitting there, in the dark, on an empty stretch of highway, waiting for someone to drive by. And I have to wonder, not just about that night, but about every other night on that road, in that wind, under that wide black sky. How many other people passed that van before me and kept driving, and how many pulled over to help? The moment that replays in my head isn't the braking, it isn't the swerving, it isn't even the sound of gravel spraying against the undercarriage of my cars. I fought for traction on a shoulder that was barely wide enough to hold me. It's the reverse lights, Two bright white rectangles appearing in the middle of a pitch-black road where nothing should be coming toward you, and the vehicle attached to them accelerating backward, straight at me, with a purpose that left no room for misinterpretation. That image lives behind my eyelids now. Every time I drive that road in the dark, it's waiting for me. I'm an emergency department nurse at a hospital just outside Salem. 12-hour shifts are standard. You clock in, you enter a controlled chaos that doesn't pause for meals or bathroom breaks or the passage of time, and 12 hours later, you walk out into a parking lot that feels like a different planet. The transition from the fluorescent intensity of the ED to the quiet darkness of a nearly empty lot at 1 in the morning is something you never quite adjust to. Your body is exhausted, but your mind is still running triage protocols, still cataloging the faces and vitals and outcomes of the people you just spent half a day keeping alive. Driving home in that state isn't dangerous exactly. You're not falling asleep. You're hyper-focused in a narrow, mechanical way. Eyes on the road, hands at 10 and 2, brain processing lane markers and taillights while the rest of you slowly powers down. It's autopilot with a safety net. You're aware enough to react, but detached enough that the drive often passes without forming a single distinct memory. I take the back roads home most nights. The highway is faster by about 10 minutes, but it requires more active driving. Merging, lane changes, unpredictable traffic from the bars closing at 2. The rural route is simpler. 2 lanes, minimal traffic, stretches of farmland that give way to sparse woodland before reaching my neighborhood. The road is dark. No streetlights for most of it, just the occasional reflective mailbox or fence post catching the sweep of your headlights. During the day, it's pleasant. At night, it's a corridor of nothing. In October of 2022, I finished a night shift that had been steady without being overwhelming. A couple of cardiac cases, a pediatric fever that turned out to be nothing serious, a laceration repair on a farm worker who caught his forearm on a fence. The kind of shift that doesn't haunt you afterward but still drains every reserve you have. I changed out of my scrubs, said goodnight to the charge nurse, and walked to my car at about 1:15. The drive started the same way it always does. Radio off, windows up, heater on low, the road unspooling in front of me like a black ribbon, my headlights carving a tunnel of visibility through the darkness. I passed the last commercial stretch, a closed feed store and a darkened church, and entered the long rural section. The fields on either side were flat and featureless under the overcast sky. No moon, no stars, just the road and whatever my headlights touched. About 15 minutes in, I came up behind another vehicle. An SUV, dark-colored, maybe charcoal or black. I couldn't identify the make or model in the dark. It was large, boxy, the kind of vehicle that could be anything from a family hauler to a work truck. It was traveling slightly below the speed limit, maybe 5 under, which didn't bother me. After a shift like that, I'm not in a rush to get anywhere. I eased off the gas and settled into a comfortable following distance, probably 4 or 5 car lengths. For a minute or two, everything was unremarkable. 2 vehicles on a quiet road moving in the same direction at the same pace. Then the SUV's brake lights flared. It wasn't a stop. Just a brief pulse of red, a quick deceleration followed by a return to normal speed. I lifted my foot from the accelerator and let the distance between us stretch slightly. Drivers do that sometimes. They see something in the road. They second-guess their speed. They glance at their phone and overcorrect. I didn't think much of it. Then it happened again. A second brake tap, harder this time. The SUV's speed dropped noticeably, and I had to apply my own brakes to maintain the gap. I scanned the road ahead through the frame of the SUV's silhouette. No animals, no debris, no intersections, no reason to slow down. The SUV drifted slightly within its lane, touching the center line before correcting back. I increased my following distance further, giving myself more reaction time. Tired driver, I told myself. Distracted, maybe looking at a map or adjusting the GPS. I'd seen it 100 times. The third brake check was sharp enough that my own tires made a brief chirping sound against the pavement. The SUV had scrubbed significant speed in a short distance, and I'd had to brake harder than I wanted to. My pulse ticked up. Not from fear, not yet, but from the heightened alertness that comes with recognizing a developing pattern. 3 brake checks in less than a mile wasn't distraction. It was deliberate. I decided to pass. A section of broken yellow line appeared ahead, indicating the oncoming lane was clear for overtaking. I signaled left and moved into the opposite lane, accelerating to get around the SUV and put it behind me. As my car drew alongside the SUV, it shifted left. Not a full lane change, not a dramatic swerve, just a subtle drift toward the center line, narrowing the space between our vehicles by 1.5 feet. Enough to make me adjust my position, enough to feel intentional. I pressed the accelerator harder, trying to complete the pass quickly. The SUV matched my acceleration. Its engine growled as it sped up just enough to keep my front bumper level with its rear quarter panel. We were side by side now, occupying both lanes on a 2-lane road in the dead of night, and the SUV wouldn't let me get ahead. I backed off, signaled right, slipped back into my lane behind it. My heart was beating faster now. The narrow focus of post-shift driving had sharpened into something more acute. I gripped the wheel tighter and watched the SUV's taillights like they were vital signs on a monitor. I waited. Another broken line section appeared. I signaled again and moved left to pass a second time. The SUV drifted left immediately. This time it crossed the center line by a full tire's width, occupying enough of the oncoming lane that a clean pass was impossible. If a car had been coming from the other direction, I would have had nowhere to go. I fell back again, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. I was no longer telling myself this was a distracted driver. Distracted drivers don't accelerate to match you when you try to pass. They don't drift into the oncoming lane at the exact moment you commit to overtaking. This was something else. This was someone who didn't want me to get ahead of them. Someone who wanted me behind them in their control on their terms. The SUV's speed dropped again. Not a tap this time. A sustained deceleration, steady and deliberate, the kind you make when you're approaching a stop sign or turning into a driveway. Except there was no stop sign. No driveway. Nothing but empty road and dark fields on either side. I braked in response, keeping the distance, watching. The SUV slowed further. 40, 30, 20, and then it stopped, completely, in the middle of the lane. No turn signal, no hazard lights, no shoulder. Just a full stop on a dark rural road at 1:30 in the morning. I stopped behind it, leaving as much space as the situation allowed. My headlights illuminated the SUV's rear end. Dirty bumper, dark tinted windows, no license plate light, or if there was one, it was burnt out. I couldn't read the plate. For 3 or 4 seconds, nothing happened. The SUV sat motionless in the lane. My engine idled. My hazard lights weren't on because I hadn't thought to activate them. The road behind me was empty and dark. I was reaching for my phone when the reverse lights came on, bright white, sudden, like eyes opening in the dark. The SUV didn't creep backward, it launched. The engine revved audibly, even through my closed windows, and the vehicle surged toward me in reverse with a speed and directness that left zero ambiguity about intent. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a transmission slip. Someone had their foot on the accelerator and their eyes on the rearview mirror, and they were coming for me. I had less than 2 seconds to react. The road shoulder on my right was narrow, unpaved gravel barely wider than my car. On my left was the oncoming lane, and beyond it, a shallow drainage ditch. I wrenched the wheel right and slammed the gas. My tires hit the gravel and immediately lost half their grip. The steering went loose and uncertain, the wheel vibrating in my hands as the car skidded across the uneven surface. Small rocks hammered the undercarriage like gunfire. The front end bucked as it hit a rut, and for one sickening moment I felt the car begin to drift toward the ditch. I corrected hard, pulling the wheel left, just enough to keep the tires on the gravel without sliding back into the lane. The SUV's rear bumper passed within what couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 feet of my front end, close enough that I could see the texture of the plastic, close enough that if I'd hesitated for even half a second, it would have been a collision. The SUV stopped. A half-second pause, complete stillness, and then the reverse lights went off. The brake lights flashed once, and the SUV pulled forward, smoothly, calmly, as if nothing had happened. It accelerated down the road at normal speed, steady and straight, no swerving, no erratic behavior. Just a vehicle driving away into the night like any other vehicle on any other road. I stayed on the gravel shoulder, my foot hovering over the brake, my hand shaking against the wheel. My breath was coming fast and shallow, the way it does when adrenaline hits after the danger is past. I watched the SUV's taillights grow smaller, watched them crest a gentle rise in the road, watched them disappear entirely. Then it was just me, alone on a dark road, half on the pavement, half on gravel, with my engine running and my heart trying to break through my ribs. I sat there for probably 90 seconds before I could trust my hands to drive. When I pulled back onto the pavement, I drove slowly, checking my mirrors every few seconds. The road behind me stayed empty. The road ahead stayed empty. I drove about a mile to a wider pull-out area near a farm gate and stopped again. I got out and inspected the car with my phone flashlight. The front bumper was intact. No impact marks, no cracked plastic. The undercarriage was coated in gravel dust and a small piece of the splash guard had come loose, but nothing was leaking and nothing was broken. I'd been lucky. I got back in and drove to a gas station about 4 miles closer to town. It was one of those 24-hour stations with a bright canopy and a bored attendant behind bulletproof glass. I parked under the lights, went inside, and bought a bottle of water. I stood by the window and drank it slowly, watching the road outside, waiting for a dark SUV to roll past. None did. I called the non-emergency police line from the parking lot. The dispatcher was professional and patient. She asked for the vehicle description. I gave her what I had. Dark SUV, large, possibly domestic make, no visible plate number. She asked for the location. I gave her the best mile marker I could estimate. She asked if there had been contact between the vehicles. No, I said, but it wasn't for lack of trying. She paused. We've actually received a couple of similar reports on that road recently, she said. I'll log this and pass it along. No unit was dispatched. No follow-up was promised. The call lasted less than 4 minutes. I drove the rest of the way home on the highway. Every set of headlights behind me made my shoulders tighten. Every dark SUV in the adjacent lane made me grip the wheel harder. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a long time before going inside. The house was dark and quiet, and for a few minutes the silence felt less like peace and more like the empty road I just escaped. The next shift I worked, I took the highway home. I've gone back to the rural road since then, but not often, and never without a heightened awareness that I didn't have before. I leave more following distance now. I don't attempt to pass vehicles that behave unpredictably. And if something feels wrong, even slightly wrong, I don't wait for confirmation. I turn around, take a different route, or pull into the nearest lit area and wait. But here's what I can't stop thinking about. The dispatcher said they've received similar reports on that road. Similar, not identical, but close enough to mention, which means I'm not the only person this has happened to. Someone else on that dark, empty stretch of farmland has seen those reverse lights come on. Someone else has had to swerve onto a gravel shoulder at 1 in the morning while a 2-ton vehicle tried to back into them. And the part that keeps me awake, the part that I think about when I'm lying in bed after a 12-hour shift with my eyes open and my mind still running, is this. The dispatcher said a couple of reports. A couple means the ones who called. It doesn't account for the ones who didn't make it to a phone. And it doesn't explain why, 3 weeks later, driving home on the highway instead of the back road, I glanced in my rearview mirror at a stoplight and saw a dark SUV idling 2 cars behind me. Same shape, same tinted windows, same missing plate light. The light turned green. I drove. It followed for exactly 1 mile, then turned off onto a side street and disappeared. I haven't seen it since, but I check my mirrors more than I used to. And some nights when I'm driving home through the dark with nothing but my headlights and the road ahead, I catch myself watching for brake lights. Not because I'm worried about stopping in time, because I'm waiting to see if they turn white